Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Adriel Boals of Hobnob Games. This is the 8th tutorial of our beginner series. And you can find this tutorial along with all of our tutorials at hobnob.games, where you can also download and play on our poker app. So today we're going to be talking about counting outs, which will lead to the rule of 2 and 4. So let's start with the basics. What do we mean by an out in poker terminology? Well, in poker, an out refers to any card that will improve your hand to what should be, what most likely will be the best hand. So, for example, let's say that our hand is 5-6 of diamonds, and the flop comes king of diamonds, 10 of diamonds, 4 of clubs. Well, this is what we call a flush draw because we need 5 diamonds to make a flush, and we currently have 4. So basically, our outs would be any diamond card. Any subsequent diamond card gives us a flush, which most likely gives us the best hand. So in this scenario, when you flop a flush draw, any card that completes your flush would be considered an out. Another example might be, let's say we just change that flop slightly to include the 3 of spades. Well, now this is what we call an open-ended straight draw, because on the board there's 3, 4, and we have 5, 6. So we have 4 cards to a straight. We just need one more card to complete our 5-card straight. So an out here would be any deuce or any 7, because any deuce would give us a straight and any 7 would also give us a straight. So any deuce or 7 here is considered an out because it will improve our hand from basically a very, very weak hand to most likely the best hand. So it's important not just to be able to know what an out is, but also to be able to count outs, to know in any given moment, how many outs do I have? Just because you don't have a strong hand right now doesn't mean that your hand doesn't have the potential to turn into a very strong hand or possibly even the nuts, i.e. the strongest possible hand anyone could hold. So let's look at some common scenarios to determine the number of outs. So for example, let's say you have a pocket pair, like pocket 4s, and the flop comes and you do not flop a set. So you don't think you have best hand right now because you have a pair of 4s. Someone might have a queen or a 9 or a bigger pocket pair. You think you need to hit another 4 in order to improve to the best hand. So in this scenario, there are 2 more 4s in the deck, hence you have 2 outs. Another common scenario is where you have 1 overcard to the board. So let's say you have ace 8 and the flop comes 9 high. Well, in this scenario, any ace should improve you to best hand. And there are 3 aces left in the deck, hence you have 3 outs. Another common scenario is an inside straight draw, or sometimes called a gut shot. So let's say you have Jack 10 and Queen 8-4 comes on the flop. Well, now any 9 will give you a straight. So here we would have their 9. There are 4 9s left in deck. Hence, in this scenario we have 4 outs. Sometimes you have 2 pair, which generally is a very strong hand, and more times than not is the best hand. But let's say, for instance, that you just know that it's not the best hand. Someone's got a straight, someone's got a flush, and you need to go to from 2 pair to a full house. Well, there are 2 jacks left in the deck and 2 9s left in the deck, any of which will give you a full house. So here we would have 4 outs. Sometimes you have 2 overcards to a deck. So let's say you have ace jack and the flop comes 10 high. Now any ace, any jack will improve you to best hand. Well, there are 3 aces left in the deck, 3 jacks, giving you a total of 6 outs. Sometimes you have a set and you think your set is not going to be good. A set is when you have a pocket pair and then you hit trips on the flop. Well, now you have a set of 5s, but you think that the other person might have a straight or a flush, and so you need to improve to a full house or 4 of a kind to beat them. Well, here you're going to have 7 outs. You're going to have 7 outs on the turn. Once the turn comes, turn going to the river, that's going to change. Now you add 3 more outs, and you have 10 outs going from the turn to the river. We'll talk more about flopping sets and improving to full houses in another tutorial. Another very common is a scenario we talked about just a moment ago, an open-ended straight draw. So another example might be you hold 9-8 and the flop comes 7-6-3. Well, now you got 6, 7, 8, 9. You need any 5 or any 10 will give you a straight. Most likely will be best hand. And so there are 4 10s and 4 5s for a total of 8 outs. Probably the most common is a flush draw. Flush draw is when you have 2 suited cards and 2 of that suit comes out on the flop. So maybe you have queen 10 of spades and a flop comes ace 6 8 with 2 spades. Now any spade will improve your hand from essentially queen high to a flush. and there are 13 of any suit in a deck. Since you have 2 in your hand and there are 2 on the flop, that leaves 9 remaining of that suit. So anytime you have a flush draw, you have 9 outs. Another common scenario could be where you have both. This is called a combo draw because you're having a combination of draws. You can have a flush draw. So if you have ace, king of diamonds, and you flop 2 diamonds, but in addition, you also have an inside straight draw. Because in this scenario, any 10 will also give you a straight, which will also likely be the best hand. So in this scenario, you have 12 outs. You have your 9 flush outs, plus there are 4 10s, but one of those 10s is a diamond that we already included in our 9 flush outs. So you have 3 other 10s in the deck that could give you a straight, equaling 12 outs. And the most outs you can have in Texas Hold'em is to have both an open-ended straight and a flush draw. So in this scenario, even though you don't have much at the moment, your probability of having best hand at the end of the hand is extremely high. So let's say, for example, you have the king, queen of hearts, and the flop comes jack, 10, 3, 2 hearts. Well, now any heart will bring you a flush, and you're open-ended. So now any ace, any 9 will give you a straight. So if you total all these up, it equals 15 outs. So where does this tell us? It's important to know how many outs you have, because knowing how many outs you have can give you an idea of the statistical probability that you will hit one of your outs, and that your essentially nothing hand or very weak hand can improve to likely the best hand. Well, to help us with this math, the math luckily is very, very simple here. We use the rule of 2 and 4. So what is the rule of 2 and 4? The rule of 2 and 4 says if you want to know if you're going to hit one of your outs on the next card, so what's the probability that, let's say you have a flush draw, that the next card will complete your flush? Well, you take the number of outs that you have. Remember, if you have a flush draw, you have 9 outs, and you multiply that number by 2, and that will give you the percentage. So for example, if you have a flush draw, again, you have 9 outs. You take the number of outs and you multiply it by 2, and it gives you 18. So the probability, if you have a flush draw, of completing your flush with one more card, with the very next card, is 18%. We'll go through another example together. Let's say another common scenario in which you flop an open-ended straight draw. Well, now you have 8 outs. You have 8 outs, you take that number 8 and you multiply it by 2. So the probability of completing your straight draw when you're open-ended with the very next card is that will happen 16% of the time. And another scenario would be, let's say you have an inside straight draw, which is sometimes called a gut shot. So in this scenario, you have 4 outs. And so we take the 4 outs, we multiply it by 2, and it's 8%. That number is not too great. So this is why an inside straight draw or gut shot is not a particularly strong hand, because you're only going to make your straight 8% of the time on the next card. But let's say that you're not interested just in the probability of hitting the next card, but over the next 2 cards, because there's both the turn and the river card to come. So if you flop a flush draw, what percentage of the time will you make a flush by the river? And this is really good to know if, for instance, you have to consider calling an all-in bet, or maybe even going all in on the flop. So once you're all in and someone calls, or if you're calling an all in, now you're guaranteed to see both a turn and a river card. So in that scenario, we want to know what's the probability we'll hit one of our outs over the next 2 cards. Well, again, the math is really, really simple. We take the number of outs, and instead of multiplying it by 2, we're now just going to multiply it by 4. So let's say, for example, again, on the flop, we have a flush draw. We have 9 outs, and we want to know what's the probability that we'll hit a flush by the end of the hand, by the time the river card comes. So we take the number of outs, 9, we multiply it by 4 this time, because we're interested in the probability over the next 2 cards, and 9 times 4 gives us 36% of the time. So if you have a flush draw, and 36% of the time, it's roughly 36%. This rule of 2 and 4 doesn't give you the exact number, but it gets you within 1 or 2 percentage points, which is close enough for what we're doing. So about 36% of the time, you'll actually hit your flush by the river. If you're open-ended straight draw, again, now you have 8 outs, 8 times 4, 32% of the time, you'll make your straight by the river card. And with a gut shot, here we just have 4 outs, we multiply that 4 times 4, and we get 16%. Again, not a very high probability. Another reason why inside straight draws are not particularly difficult. But with the rule of 2 and 4, this gives you a very easy method in order to determine the rough statistical probability that you will improve your hand from probably not a very good hand to what will most likely be the best hand. In our next tutorial, we're going to take this percentage of time that we'll hit one of our outs, and we'll start to be able to calculate pot odds. So if you get called, someone bets all in and you have a flush draw, maybe you know that you're going to hit your flush 36% of the time, but given how much money is in the pot and how large the bet is, should you call? We got to do some basic math here to figure out the correct answer. And that's what we'll be covering in our next tutorial. As always, you can find us at hobnob.games, where you can find this tutorial along with all of our tutorials and where you can download and play on our poker app. See you next time.